Hey everyone, Casey Cangelosi here with your Percussion episode 49. This is the hardest hitting percussion news station on Facebook. We ask, I don't, it's not funny. We ask the hard questions, we get down to the tough issues, and we have anyway, over there is Ben Charles.
Hi, everybody.
And Megan Arns.
Hello.
And Laurel Black.
Hi.
And our guest today is, and happy Father's Day, July 19th.
Yay.
Our guest today is an instructor at Troy University in Troy, Alabama. He has performed and trained in the U.S., Portugal, Canada, Ireland, Switzerland, Germany, Ghana, Austria, Hungary, and the Czech Republic. Ben, holy crap, that's crazy. He has been a frequent performer at major conference seminars including PASIC, the Midwest Band and Orchestra Clinic, the CBDNA Conference, and Bang on a Can festivals, just to name a couple. His research dissertation was on John Luther Adams' composition Inuksuit. He's a super diverse musician. He gave a killer frame drum clinic here at JMU just a month or two ago, and he's a very talented composer and producer. So hello and welcome to Dr. Ben Fraley. How's it going?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So Laurel and I, we had this crazy coincidence coming back from the Ted Adkats percussion seminar in Maine, and we happened to book an extra day in Boston, and there happened to be a performance put on by percussion guest Amy Garapik and other percussion guest Maria Finkelmeyer, and guess who we ran into there but Ben Fraley, Megan Arns, and Brian Calhoun, also at percussion guest, and we ran into Matt Sherrick, also at percussion guest. Let's see. Other people we know, of course, Sam Solomon was playing. He's our teacher from Boston Conservatory. Nancy Zeltzman was there. It was such a wild coincidence. Megan, how did you end up on the project that day? Let's start with you.
Yeah, well, I was going to be in the Northeast area, and I keep up with Maria and Amy very regularly, and so I knew that this event was happening. I had participated in a couple of Inuksuits before, and some of my students participated in a performance in South Bend, Indiana in August, so right before the last school year, and they loved it and they wanted to do it again. So I heard there was one happening in Boston, and one of them is from that area. So she drove a car full of the students up, and so once I heard that they were doing that, I said, oh, I have to be there, I have to meet them there. So yeah, I just happened to be around the area, and thought it was a good coincidence. So yeah.
It was a wild coincidence. And Ben Fraley, why don't you let us know why you were there? And Ben Charles, we know you weren't there, so...
I just avoid all sorts of group events. I just don't like people.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, all right.
Plus, they already had a band there, so I didn't need to go.
The quote was cool. I was at the performance basically because with my research and my interest in John Luther Adams' Inuksuit, sometimes I will just hear through the grapevine that there will be a performance, and if I know that I can be in the area, then I try to make the trip as long as it's feasible. So I happened to be in Boston because actually the day before rehearsal, I was having my bachelor party in Boston because all of my groomsmen are still up in the Northeast, and I'm from New England, so basically all the planets aligned for me to be there, and I always love coming home to see friends and playing Inuksuit in another place, and it's just always fun to play the piece in a different area because it makes it special, it makes it unique.
Since your dissertation was on this piece, I think a lot of present company are aware of the piece in general, but can you give us, I don't know, just kind of a quick, maybe something we might not know about it. I mean, I know it's a big installation piece. I know that it's, you know, I know roughly what happens, but I don't know. Tell us something that analytically we might not know.
Well, I'll start with just a little bit of background, saying that my dissertation or treatise at Florida State University is referred to as a treatise. The title was Creating Musical Landscapes, and it's the origins, the performance, the analysis, and the logistics of John Luther Adams' Inuksuit. And my main idea with this document was to kind of put to rest some myths that I thought maybe some people might have, because since 2009, the piece has been played quite a lot. It's been played all over the U.S. It's been played internationally at The Hague, in Portugal, and I felt like it was getting a lot of really great press, and then people coming and seeing it and being very interested about it, but maybe they just thought, okay, maybe this is just a flash mob. And at the time I had to pick a topic, I had already played the piece about 6 times, and also had been on the recording. So I was like, okay, I want to talk about where this piece comes from, what the performance practices are involved in it, how do you set up your own performance if you're going to, and then also how does this piece structure? The origins of this piece were the things that I think I was the most interested in, because it really kind of didn't just come apart as John Luther Adams saying, I want to make a really big piece for 99 percussionists, I want to put it outside. It started very gradually with my teachers at CCM, the College Conservatory of Music, percussion group Cincinnati, Rusty Burge, Alan Oddie, and James Cully. They went up to Fairbanks, Alaska, and were going to play The Glory and the Grandeur, the percussion concerto that Russell Peck wrote, and they were going to play that with the Fairbanks Orchestra. And while they were up there, they met John Luther Adams. And at the time, and Percussion Group Cincinnati still does this, is they will play pieces that are sometimes meant for quartets as a trio, because there's only 3 of them. So, like, for instance, it's not uncommon for you to go to a PGC concert and they're playing third construction with just the 3 of them, because they've arranged it that way. So they had done some things similar with John's quartets. And so that started a relationship, and eventually that led to Strange and Sacred Noise. And Strange and Sacred Noise is a 6-part, like 90-minute piece for percussion in 6 sections. And so this piece, you know, is very intense, it's very loud, and it's kind of an indoor piece. But as time kind of went on, kind of switching gears, it brings you to Dr. Rob Essler, who at the time was a student at UCSD with Steve Schick. And then with Robert kind of seeing Strange and Sacred Noise played inside, it's just this crazy sonic idea. And Rob said, well, what does this sound like outside? Does it matter? Rob's dissertation at UCSD was about phenomenon, basically, meaning the idea of a first person noticing an act and what that means to that person, which then kind of resulted in space versus place kind of idea, and saying, okay, does it matter where a piece of music is played? So they noticed that when they took Strange and Sacred Noise outside, it didn't have the same effect. It didn't have the reflection the reflection of the sound, and it wasn't as intense. And everybody who was in this project noticed it, and they said, "Okay, well, if this is true, then what would that relate to, like a piece being outside? What would that sound like? Like, is it just marching band, or is it the same thing as a jazz band playing on a town square and playing a gazebo? Like, what relationship does music have in a natural space?"
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very cool. Ben, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question actually. With we're talking about Inuksuit here, and obviously it's a very unique piece. And I would imagine that most people, when they see it or perform it, would say, "There's, I've never seen a piece like this," for obvious reasons. But Ben, maybe in your research you came across, or does anyone know? Are there any other pieces that are in some way similar to this?
You know, I looked, and the only thing I can think of is that there is no piece out there that's specifically for the purposes of being outside in a natural space. I think the distinction between, oh, we can take this piece and play it outside, and you've just taken a piece and played it outside.
Yeah.
But Inuksuit is specifically to be played outdoors.
Yeah. The only pieces I could kind of think of in my mind were, in C obviously has the sort of everyone starts and progresses through the piece at their own rate sort of thing, that it's not so focused on lining up, so to speak. And then there's the Xenakis piece, Persifasa, which has kind of a spatial element to it, and I guess Russell Peck lift off as well. But yeah, I can't really think of anything in any way similar, or I can't really even think of a piece written for the outdoors, so to speak, other than Inuksuit.
The Phillips Pavilion, speaking of Xenakis, came to mind. But again, I think they played Verres' Poème Electronique with the speakers installed within the building, and yeah, that piece I don't think was composed for that. They just happened to use it as a installation, kind of walk-through installation thing with music. But it seems like the size, 99 percussionists, right?
Yeah, that's the limit.
The limit. Oh, I see. So then they're down. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I always thought it had to be 90, or preferably 99. But
I'm sure the goal is to get 99, but isn't it written for? Doesn't he say 9 to 99?
Yes, that's true. And what that I think relates to is because this piece is very mathematically organized. I think John said, okay, this is a number in which, because there are 3 groups in Inuksuit, he said, I think not logistically, but numerically, the least I could feel comfortable with is having 3 in each group, and then the most I feel that he was thinking that he would feel comfortable would be 33 in each group for the full 99. And to be honest, in my experience, there's a good and bad on either side of the spectrum. If you did a version that had 9, the upside would be not as much equipment and probably more high-quality equipment, and you wouldn't take up as much space, I suppose. The only problem with that is I think the texture then really thins. Now, you get more towards the middle of the spectrum, and it's a little bit more like, okay, we have mostly good equipment, and we have enough people where the texture doesn't seem very thin. When you get all the way to the 99, you're talking about a very big space. You're talking about a lot of gear, and then the logistics go up from there.
I just want to call out Brian Calhoun real quick. He definitely blew some rests when like he didn't know Laurel and I would be there, so I got up in his face with my camera and got nice and close, and you're not supposed to break performance character, and he cracked up pretty hard, and I saw some old lady walking through the park later. She said this was a terrible run. That one guy. That one guy basically, like, does he even care about what the composer wrote? And I said, I completely agree. This is quite frankly
I think we derailed a couple of folks.
You know,
Brian was one.
The reason
Sam Solomon was just like, cut me!
The reason Brian was probably missing notes is because he didn't have his heels with him.
Right.
That could be. Sam Solomon blew it too. I have
to say though, there was I saw a picture. It was this great picture of Brian playing, and there are these two little girls sitting in front of him, just like enraptured by what he's doing. It's a really cool photo.
Yeah, that's great.
I will say this about this particular production of the Inuksuit. A little bit about this piece is about definitely promoting it and making sure people come to it. And then the other part of it is kind of like foot traffic. So the first time I played it was, I think the first time it was done with 99 players, and that was in Morningside Park in Harlem in New York City. And that was awesome. A lot of, I couldn't really tell, but it did seem like there was a good amount of foot traffic because it is New York. And in Boston, in the Arnold Arboretum, there were people there specifically for that piece, and that really, that was very cool. And it's also the first time I've been followed. Like, once we left the center and we start kind of going to our spots, there were these two children who were following me, and their parents were like, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "We're listening to the shell music," because I had my conch shell with me. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. This is the first time this has ever happened.
Well, it was just a really nice day and a wonderful surprise, and yeah, just what a great reason to get everyone together and just see everybody. It was really, really fun. Ben, you wanted to talk a little bit about, I don't know how to introduce this really, but being an adjunct and what that kind of is like, and maybe kind of, I think we've talked a little bit about this before on the podcast, so it's not really unfamiliar territory, and I think most people in our positions definitely know what's going on. I don't think many students know much about this, but can you share just a little bit about how the waters feel right now and what's on your mind?
Yeah, and I think all of us have been adjuncts at some point, so and please share if you'd like to. I've been teaching adjunct at Troy University. I just completed my second year. I'll be going into my third year next year. And I guess the thing that I've noticed about being adjunct, an adjunct instructor, is that our positions are not necessarily all created equal in a matter of saying. So my adjunct position will not necessarily be like so-and-so's adjunct position. And that's just been really interesting for me to research, just because the hot button kind of topic lately has been, how universities are abusing adjunct instructors, and how universities are just pushing so much adjunct faculty onto their payroll to try to cut costs, I assume. And although I don't think it's the easiest way to make a living, I would say that it is a good step to have, especially once you're either in school or you're out of school and it's your first job. It's a good place to at least test some theories that you have on teaching. And I know that my position here was really different from an adjunct position I had in Cincinnati at the Cincinnati Christian university. You know, my responsibilities were different. How much I got paid was different. What I was expected to do was different. But in most ways, I try to make it work for me the best I can. So even though I might not be being paid a lot or I don't have a lot of responsibilities, I always try to keep in mind that it's a very positive thing for me, and that when I'm not doing things at Troy, I'm doing things elsewhere. I'm doing clinics. I'm going and I'm playing in orchestras in Florida and Alabama. So I always try to keep busy, even if my job doesn't necessarily dictate that I'm here 40 hours a week.
So let me just to shed a little more light on the topic at large. Since we're a hard-hitting news percussion show and we follow the Bill O'Reilly model, I'm going to hit you with some hard data that I got from YouTube.
I do have a big forehead, so we are moving in the right direction.
Oh, okay. So 31% of part-time faculty live below or around the poverty line. 51% of teachers in higher ed institutions are adjuncts, 51%. And let's see, between 1970 and 2008, adjunct salaries went down 49%, while president salaries went up 35%. In 2010, 33,655 PhDs filed for food stamps. One in four part-time faculty receive financial public assistance, which I think is, they're saying, are on welfare. A growing pool of doctorates are growing to a proportionate shrinking number of available jobs. In 2000, 45,000 new PhDs were put out into the job field. In 2010, 70,000 new PhDs were put out into the field. So that means between 2000 and 2010, nearly 600,000 new PhDs came out. And that is for only 150,000 new jobs that were added. And I didn't know about what they meant by added, as in they are brand new, or as in vacancies were created.
Yeah.
And 150. I assume it's that, because the point of the segment was you got about 600,000 people fighting for 150,000 vacancies. So yeah, you're left with 450,000 jobless PhDs or underemployed PhDs, as they say. And I got to say, I didn't dig super hard with the stuff that Ben shared. And of course, I've seen some of this stuff before, but actually nowhere in there did they mention music. And no one said DMA, and no one said music programs or anything. So just to be clear, it's wide across the fields. And I've seen other things that give information on the degrees that it's really difficult to get employment, and the worst employable degrees, they make a list or whatever, and music isn't even on the list. So it's it's kind of everywhere.
Yeah, I think from what I gather, I think it's significantly worse in other fields for one reason I'll talk about in a second. But you were talking about like how many people live below the poverty line. Actually, 2 years ago when I was looking around for apartments in Boca Raton, I came to this like decent-looking apartment complex, and I went to their office and said, hey, I'd like some information. Can you tell me about rent? And they said, oh, you know that we're government subsidized housing for people that basically on the poverty line. And I kind of paused for a second, and I was like, so what kind of income are we talking here? Because I might actually fall in there. Ironically, I guess, sadly, happily, I did not qualify for that. But anyway, that being beside the point, if I could make an analogy between Inuksuit and adjunct teaching, here we go. One thing that I think makes Inuksuit such a successful piece, and Ben talked about this, is that you're not taking a Beethoven symphony and simply performing it outside. It's a piece written for the medium of being outside, if that makes sense. With adjunct teaching, if you treat it like it's a full-time job and just say, I'm exclusively going to teach in this university, that's probably a very bad plan, because you have limited income, there's a limited spectrum of things you can do, and basically you're probably shutting down your career for the future. But if you treat it like it's a part-time, I don't want to say gig, but a part-time job where while you're at your university, you're dedicating everything you have to it, but, and here's where we're very lucky in music, it's very easy to supplement your teaching with other sources of income related to music. For example, private teaching, gigging with symphonies around, composing if you're a composer, this sort of thing. There's so many great, or producing for, you know, recording sessions, so many great things you can do in addition to your part-time work at a university that are very relevant and actually can help you get a full-time job. And just for perspective, without going into numbers of how much money I make, at a certain point when I had several private students, my private teaching outside of my university job was actually alone sustaining my rent. I could pay my rent with just my part-time teaching, and then my other, you know, part-time job income, so to speak, was, you know, great for paying for car insurance and buying food and that sort of thing. But actually, like, dollars per hour wise, working for yourself as a private teacher or something like that is probably significantly better money than the part-time teaching at a university, which then in turn can help you get more outside work. So the things kind of feed each other. So anyway, that's my Inuksuit part-time teaching analogy, I guess.
Yeah, and I think something that was in the document, and maybe somebody has said, is that not all adjunct positions are created equally. Like, some of them, bad pay and not a lot of experience, but others, the pay could be decent depending on the cost of living with where you are and what you're expected to do. And I know, like, fresh out of grad school, I stayed in the city up in Boston and did the thing where you have like 4 jobs and barely make ends meet, but you're in the city, so you're supposed to think that's awesome. And then interviewed and got an adjunct job in West Virginia, where Casey was, and even though it was adjunct pay, I suppose, it was like, dude, I have a savings account now. This is awesome. And yeah, so maybe it's, and that's probably because, you know, I didn't have debt in the sense that you usually do. I don't have kids, stuff like that. You know, I wasn't worried about that type of thing.
I felt the same way when I got to Concord. Coming out of school, you have $0 in your bank account, but don't have any debt. And I think our positions that our colleague Tim Mainland, who's visiting us right now in town, when he was the chair, what he was able to create for us was really great, and it was one of those extraordinary adjunct situations where in a lot of other schools it wouldn't have been allowed.
You know, and I think the interesting thing that I noticed when I moved here about a year ago was I wasn't even sure that I was going to be here long term, and it turns out that my fiance and I will be here next year. But in a conversation with one of my parents, you know, discussing money and things like that, the amount of money that I earn solely only from Troy does list me below the poverty line in Alabama, which is saying something, I think. But on the positive side, what I make up going out and gigging to make sure I have a living for me and my fiance, that gives me a range of ways to go out and make more contacts, make more funds for living and things like that. And I think where people view being an adjunct as a punishment rather than an opportunity, and this is not a finger waving or wagging or anything like that, but where people find it as a burden is when they can't supplement other ways of doing it, even if they have 3 adjunct jobs, because then in that realm they feel like they can't focus on the task at hand. One of the Casey, I think it was the link that you sent me, showed one particular person who was, you know, working at 3 or 4 different community colleges in Denver, and he's like, I have to be a conveyor belt kind of teacher. I can't custom my classes, to each classroom or each school, because he's like, I don't have the time.
There's something to be said about the quality of instruction. I don't think that an adjunct necessarily provides poor quality of instruction, but I think there's far more of a risk that a university takes when you hire someone that teaches at 3 or 4 schools and doesn't have time. I know my teaching, all I was really doing was teaching at FAU, so I don't think my teaching suffered, and with lessons where you're just stuck with one person for an hour, I don't know that it really could in the sense of a traditional classroom. But yeah, there's definitely the risk of in a larger English class that papers are going to be kind of swept through a lot faster than really graded well.
Yeah, that's the model. That's the model where I think it suffers the most.
Yeah.
I think the nice thing is that everyone, nobody likes this. The tenure track people see it as the adjuncts are getting abused and not paid right. Department chair sees it that way. Everyone sees it that way. And I know there was one semester at Concord I had 25 credit hours, not contact hours, but 25 class hours on the books, and I was teaching jazz band, I was doing the technology class, I was doing 2 sections of music appreciation, I was doing all the percussion stuff. It just was a really, really busy semester, and the very next semester's faculty planning meeting, I just said, you guys, I'm drowning, this is so tough, and all the senior faculty, literally all of them, said, oh great, what can I take for you? What do you need help with? And it was no discussion at all. They just said, okay, well, I'll take the tech class, no problem. Another one said, I can take a 101. They're like so sympathetic and helpful and just kind about it. And it's tricky because, of course, your adjunct pay directly went down when you give up hours. So it's tricky. It's because you hear adjuncts trying to soak up as many hours as they can because they need to make a living out of this.
I just had a quick question for Casey and Laurel. One thing that like at a let's say Troy, like they need a percussion instructor, they don't have enough hours for a full-time person, so they hire an adjunct or something like that. What do they do like at Concord when they need like an oboe or a bassoon professor, someone that there might not even be someone in the area to teach, 2 hours a week or whatever?
Yeah, we watched that happen a couple times there, and they would always just take who they could get, and we would get fresh DMAs. They happened to be from WVU, and they were always great.
Gotcha.
The problem is, of course, they're there making very few hours, and it's just kind of a platform for them to apply for their next gig that's a little more secure or a little more lucrative. But as far as finding quality, we were there. Of course, I was there for 6 years. Laurel was there for 3, so we weren't there for very long to observe a wide sample of that situation. But in the cases we saw, the people they got were stellar.
I was just wondering, so you never saw a situation where like a saxophone teacher was teaching tubas or something like that?
Not so drastic. No, we had like a brass teacher was teaching all the brass, and a woodwind person was teaching woodwinds. There was a distinct shortage, though. Like one person taught flute, clarinet, and saxophone. And we didn't have any students who studied double reeds, probably because there wasn't a double reed specialist.
Yeah, I mean, like in South Florida, we had plenty of people that could, come do that, but somewhere like West Virginia, I just didn't know.
I think at Concord they handled it very, very well, thanks to the same group of senior faculty I'm referring to, and our chair being an artist, and just he gets it. So yeah, there it was great. But something else I was going to say, it's amazing just talking about this whole climate and difficulty. I'll share a job posting on Facebook, and the amazing variety you get with people's responses. And I know one of those job postings I'm thinking of was just absurdly ridiculous. You were going to be the band director, you were going to teach all percussion, you were going to teach jazz band, and you were going to teach all the woodwind lessons, and it was basically the department.
It must be a joke.
No, I'm not joking.
That's insane.
Yeah, it was insane. I think I decided it was 3 jobs, like 3 full-time jobs at like a sane school. So no,
Yeah.
literally that was the job. And the sad thing is, I bet they got 40 applicants with PhD.
Also, like, why are schools like that trying to have a music program? You know, like, do your research. And should you really be putting out music majors? Are they going to be competitive?
Well, I think that it is not so much they're starting a new music program, but they have a music program and it's been okay. And this is kind of
And
this
they're
whole.
fighting administrative things, most likely.
Yeah, like what you're seeing is the decline and the subtraction of the positions, and you're seeing that whole which I think they called it that in one of the documentaries we watched, Ben.
Yeah.
So we were watching that whole process unfold, and so you get these ridiculous job announcements, because that used to be filled by 3 people, like I said it should be, and those two job lines have disappeared, and now they got to fill it with 1. And that's why I've said over and over and over, it's amazing that JMU got all 6 tenure line job things fulfilled, and we were able to complete all those searches and keep all those job lines. And in fact, we even created a job line, the double bass job lines tenure track now. So it's amazing that I don't know, just to be in that standing.
Yeah, you know, guys, I have to be honest. When we decided we were going to talk about like adjunct business a little bit, I was like, oh boy, this is going to be a huge bitch fest.
Yeah.
But I'm so pleasantly surprised that we're trying to find all of the ways that we could make it work for us. Like, and just like Ben was talking about an analogy with Inuksuit, it's almost like as a person entering the professional field, it's almost as if we need to think of adjunct positions the way med students think of residency. Like, they finish school, but they're not allowed to do it on their own yet, and so they're paid to work, but it's like shit hours, shit pay, but they get all this experience.
That is exactly correct, I think.
Yeah, and it's like, it's kind of uplifting to hear everybody say it in that way, because it's very easy to think of adjunct as it's the university administration taking advantage of the individuals, and that might be true. I think in a lot of cases that is true, because it's a cheap alternative to actually keeping a program running with full-time faculty. I do think that exists in part of this conversation, but it's really cool that we're taking it in stride and saying, make it work for you, but it's just a job. It's not your life. It's just a job, and
Yeah,
your own
that's
goals.
true. What I've been thinking about a lot in this conversation was like how this varies regionally. You know, like Laurel, you mentioned in being in Boston or being in a big city and being somewhere where you can have a lot of pieces to the pie and make it work. And for a lot of people, that's like, it works really, really well, and they would have it no other way, because they get to do all these different things and they don't want to do one thing. But also, I think in a smaller, maybe in a rural setting, something that I experienced when I was teaching adjunct was something I got on my evaluations, which I think was like a plan of the students, because they knew I wanted to be there more, was, you know, this instructor's great, but she's never here. She's here 1 day a week. So, like, I think in a lot of ways, hiring a lot of adjuncts is very unfair to the students, because they don't have people who are really invested in, might not be invested in them because they're not around, and it is just another small piece of the pie where they're not making very much money, and for some people they might care a lot and be great, but also if you're not getting paid well, there's a high chance that you're going to do what you get paid for and you're going to leave. So, I don't know.
Oh, exactly.
Specifically for applied instruction, I think that's hard. You know, running a percussion program when you're there 1 day a week.
Well, and again, when you say invested, they don't have time to invest, it's not to say that the instructors don't care, but simply some of these examples we see, they teach at 4 different community colleges. They literally don't have time. Ben Fraley, you were going to say something.
No, I just want to make sure that something was clear. Here at Troy University, I'm not the only percussion guy here. Dr. Adam Blackstock runs the percussion department and marching percussion. And then also here we have Dr. Brian Nosny. And then I'm here for overflow. Because Troy University is open enrollment and because the marching band scholarship program is so huge, to offset all of the overload that some of the full-time faculty have, like, that meant they had to call me. They didn't have to call me. I got lucky. But a year before I started teaching here, my fiancée Jennifer got called, and we were both at Florida State, and between Tallahassee, Florida, and Troy, Alabama, it's about 3 hours. So for that first year, she was doing the commute once a week. She'd drive up 3 hours to Troy, and then she'd drive back in one day. And then the next year, when I was working, we would drive up together. And then when we were done at Florida State, we're just like, you know, if this is going to be the thing that we're going to be putting a lot of time into, because there are so many clarinet students and there are so many percussion students at Troy, we should just move there. Which actually was kind of a nice sign to our dean that we were serious about what happens at Troy. But for sure, it's not like when I was doing the commute, it wasn't like, okay, I'm driving up and I'm doing methods and percussion ensemble and all that stuff. I literally was coming in to teach non-majors who had scholarships with the marching band, who by contract with their scholarship have to take a private lesson.
Yeah, yeah. I know I've heard from afar just great things about Troy and everything that's happening, and yeah, what Adam Blackstock has created there, and it all just, yeah, with you there, man, it sounds great.
It's really cool because we are kind of a little bit in the middle of nowhere. I mean, and this is coming from somebody who has lived mostly in an urban situation. This is very rural.
Mm-hmm. The whole, you mentioned a commute. It seems like it's very common, like we said, and an instructor will teach at many different colleges, many different community colleges, and it'll be this huge, crazy trek. Laurel and I are only about 3.5 hours from Concord, and effectively Laurel could have kept her job. And a lot of our friends assumed, like, oh, okay, so what days will Laurel go down there?
Wow.
And she would have had to go there a lot. I mean, we both did a lot there, but we both kind of weren't even ever seriously considering that, right, Laurel?
No. Mm-mm.
Yeah, it's like, even that, man.
What kind of life do you want, and what kind of person are you? I'm not a person that would find balance in that type of lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, and when I was at Concord, I got asked to commute once a week. Hey, will you come teach at the big university in West Virginia, once a week or something? It was going to be a 6-hour drive or something. I just said no. I'm not even consider it. It's just, yeah, I don't know.
I think it was round trip 6 hours, but even so, like, you'd have to do it in one day.
Yeah, no, busy enough. Quality over quantity, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Megan, what do you have to share with us today?
Yeah, so what's today? June 19th. We're coming up on June 21st. Does anyone know what June 21st is?
Game of Thrones is tonight, so I don't know. Are they doing another one or?
No, it's a holiday.
Is it
summer solstice?
Okay.
I don't know if you consider that a holiday, but it's a recognizable day, the summer solstice, and there is a music festival that started in France in 1982 called the Fete de la Musique, and in English that translates to Make Music Day. And they started this festival every year on June 21st, the summer solstice, and since then it has spread to over 700 cities across 120 countries, including a lot of presence in the United States now. And in the United States, the group that presents Make Music Day is the NAMM Foundation, the National Association of Music Merchants, and it's coordinated by the nonprofit organization called Make Music Alliance. And their mission is they encourage all people, young and old, amateur or professional, to experience the pleasures and benefits of making music. So this is the longest day of the year and the first time, on the longest day of the year, first time and seasoned musicians pour out onto streets and into parks, plazas, porches, and other public spaces to enjoy music making with friends, neighbors, and other music makers. So the goal is really to involve as many people as possible and as many public places as possible and as many cities as possible. This year in the U.S. there are 38 different cities participating, and it also says 38 U.S. cities in the entire state of Vermont are organizing Make Music celebrations, encompassing thousands of music-making opportunities nationwide. So just to give you some ideas for these events, one category of events are single-instrument mass appeal events, and there are 175 of those taking place across the country. And there will be instruments such as guitars, harmonicas, accordions, flutes, recorders, pianos, saxophones. I can keep going, but basically one instrument and one piece is composed for the instrument, and the goal is to get as many people as possible. So I had heard about these mass appeal single instrument things from Amy, actually, who we had on a couple weeks ago, Amy Garapek. She used to work for NAMM part-time and organizing some of these events, and it's pretty cool. So choosing a really cool public space, choosing a composer to write for that instrument, and then gathering as many ukulele players that you can find in New York City. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Really interesting. Also, there are music education events. There are free guitar, harmonica, ukulele, drum, and other instrument lessons offered nationwide. So, for example, in New York City, there are 50 guitar teachers that will set up in the pedestrian plazas around Times Square, equipped with a guitar for themselves and a guitar for anyone interested in learning to play. And Fender is sponsoring that. And in Nashville, they're doing a similar thing. The Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum will host a free guitar group lessons, during which aspiring guitarists will learn basic chords and strumming techniques through familiar country songs. So I think that music education thing is really cool, because it's just like anyone can come participate, and lots of people are donating their time, to do that. All the events are free, by the way. All the events are free for everyone. Another example is mass events. So there's mass appeal, and there's also just mass number events, such as the Sousa-Palooza, which is taking place in Chicago, Cleveland, New York, and St. Paul, Minnesota. And they will bring together hundreds of brass and wind musicians to play the music of John Philip Sousa, while street studios in Chattanooga, Los Angeles, Boston, and New York will feature DJs and producers with a simple setup, which has a laptop, mics, and MIDI controllers, speakers, and instruments, bringing gear and engaging passersby in a spontaneous, collaborative production of original music on the streets. And that is a partnership with Found Sound Nation. There are other examples. One other is in Boston, Lumit Audio is presenting a street studio. So lots of interesting mass events. There are also new commissions for this event too, and I'm actually participating in one in Chicago, so Make Music Chicago. We're doing a piece called Shimmer, and it's written by drummer Brian Chase. He's the drummer for the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. And this will take place in New York City, where Brian will be leading the performance, in Boston, Chicago, where I am right now, and Nashville. Dozens of performers will premiere Shimmer. It's a new 45-minute work scored for 16 or more Zildjian cymbals arranged in a circle. So we're doing our performance in Maggie Daley Park, Memorial Park, which is a new park in downtown Chicago.
If you could only get 100 minor cymbals, would it work?
It doesn't work. Doesn't
count. Work? All right. Yeah.
And the New York performance is in Madison Square Park. Okay, a couple other interesting ones. If you go on their website, Make Music New York, whoops, that's a www.makemusicday.org. You can see the listing of all the different things, but a couple of funny ones, interesting ones. Okay, this one's not funny, but Philip Glass will help usher in Make Music New York's second decade by playing from his Etudes for Piano at Pier 1 in Riverside Park, along with 40 students from New York City Public Schools. For the funny side, Eye of the Tiger on Boomwhackers. Fans attending baseball games on Make Music Day in New York City and in Madison, Wisconsin, for minor league teams. In New York, it'll be the Staten Island Yankees, and Madison, the collegiate Madison Mallards, will be given boomwhackers, which are obviously pitched hollow pipes made of plastic, if you don't know what that is. And during the 7-inning stretch, conductors and a singer will come onto the field and lead fans in a crowdsourced performance of Survivor's Eye of the Tiger, inviting people to whack the tubes on cue on the seats or in bleachers in front of them.
But hopefully not on other people.
Interesting. Again, the goal is to get as many people involved as possible. There are also performances in Minneapolis, Cleveland, Salem, Auburn, Alabama, Ben.
Okay.
And again, all events are free and open to the public. And if you're interested in participating in one, it might be too late for this year because, no, it probably is not too late. If you're in, well, it will be too late once this podcast is posted because it will be June 21st. But check it out for next year on makemusicday.org where you can sign up and register for different events. Now, it's definitely not too late to plan your own event for next year, and Make Music has a great resource on their website. It's an event planning kit. It's in 4 different sections, and it tells you about the Make Music movement. It tells you how to get involved, how to publicize your event. It gives you a timeline of when you should plan your event, different things to be shooting for, different 90 days out where you should be 60 days out. And it also gives you templates for press releases, media advisory, recommended social media posts, and also a section of resources, of websites and logos. So I was thinking this is something I'm going to tell my students about and encourage them to plan their own event because it has all these resources there, and that's a great experience for them to do something where they don't need to raise any money for it. They can do it for free. Everyone can come for free, and it's a good experience in organizing something with some guidance. And of course, it's exciting because it's happening all over the world. So you're getting publicity by the Make Music nonprofit organization and through NAMM as well. So if you tell them that you're doing your event, they'll publicize it for you and add you to the list. So yeah, I thought that was a timely segment because we're coming up here on the summer solstice on June 21st.
Wow.
You guys participated in Make Music Days before or heard of it?
Yeah, actually the Inuksuit that you and I did in Morningside Park was a Make Music New York thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then coincidentally enough, maybe 2 years ago, I did a Inuksuit again in Nashville, and that was a Make Music Nashville event.
Uh-huh. Cool.
Yeah, cool. I think, ironically, or perhaps coincidentally, one of the last times Casey and I were in Boston happened to be Make Music Day. And
yeah, Maria, right?
Yeah, Maria, she spearheaded it, and some of our friends have a quartet, and they were playing, and so we went and surprised them, which was fun.
Yeah, Maria's done a great job of organizing Make Music Boston. There's events all over the city, and she's been doing a great job with that.
Megan, your topics always make me feel really self-centered and egocentric because it's great to hear about all these amazing projects people are doing that involve the community, and it's outreaching, and it's, I don't know, just all these really charitable, cool things that are just good for music at large.
Yeah, and I have to say,
Go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say, I enjoy playing for non-musicians, I think, so much more than for musicians, because they're just there to enjoy it. They're not there to like evaluate you, or they just want to hear music. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I mean the more people that we can involve too, and show them what we do, and bring people into our world more, I think that just helps the art form. That
Buy this.
Exposed. So, oh gosh.
Buy that. Just buy it.
Great segues, and that's a horrible one.
Buy one of Megan's CDs, and then buy these mallets. Just buy them. Buy them. They sound great on timpani.
Uh,
I just want to see how
That
many.
has been brought to you by.
Yeah,
Triangle beaters.
I bet this will be funny a couple more times. Hey, Laurel, what have you been reading this week?
yeah, so I've continued reading the book Walking in This World, which I talked about a little bit last week at TAP's East Coast for our previous episode. And while I was looking through it this week for for activities and a topic, I realized that it was actually incredibly relevant to what I thought might be our conversations about adjunct teaching. So the chapter I read is called Discovering a Sense of Personal Territory. And for Julia Cameron, the author, her idea of personal territory is essentially your creative self or your artistic persona kind of versus the part of yourself that has to work, that has to do all these other things that art create whatever your art might be. And so she says, in order to form those boundaries that kind of protect artistic selves, that we need to set boundaries in our relationships in a way, whether they're romantic, familial, collegial, or collaborative. And she has three main ideas throughout this chapter. Those are, number one, creativity responds to nourishment and warmth. Number two, we need to build boundaries when it comes to requests from others. And number three, and perhaps most poignantly, think of your creative energy like a creative bank account and budget it. And that was new to me and is not something I'm particularly good at. So I actually have just a series of little quotes from her under each of those headings, so I'll just read through those quickly and hopefully we'll get sparked on any kind of conversation here. So back to creativity, response to nourishment and warmth. She says, when someone who ignites our creative imagination crosses our path, that person is a fuse lighter. And a person who does the opposite is a wet blanket. And obviously you want to surround yourself with fuse lighter types that help you be who you want to be. She says, creativity expands in an atmosphere encouraging to it and constricts self-protectively in an atmosphere that is cynical or hostile. And this is why our close friends must be safe and smart, but not so smart aleck that our creative child is afraid to speak up. Yeah. And she might say it a little later on, but in a way I think, school, even though it's great for teaching and private lessons, depending on your countenance and how sensitive you are, it could be not bad for you, but hard to recover a sense of bravery. If you're always met with criticism, however constructive it might be and well-intentioned, it can be tough to come back from it. But I think it's a real thing, and a lot of people have that. So if that's anybody out there listening, you're not alone. I gotcha, and I know a lot of other people that do too. Cameron writes, nurturing is part of a partnership, and over-nurturing is the usurping of your creative energy for someone else's agendas. So we like to offer our help to others, especially if we have best friends who are maybe blocked creatively. We want to help them, but then we give them everything we've got and we have nothing left for ourselves. And that could be a tough balance.
And that's that creative energy being spent somewhere that you might, like the bank account idea.
Yeah. So these three main ideas that I've identified really kind of all, you could put any of these things together to form a topic. They're all so closely related. As artists, we have antennae sensitive to the thoughts and feelings of those around us, and we can be chilled by indifference, hurt by lack of consideration, and we can be exhausted and diminished if we are in the company of those who talk down to us or treat us subtly like the identified patient. Oh, you and your crazy ideas, which I've had. Before Casey found his way into my life, some ex-boyfriends used to say stuff like that, like, "Oh, you're just this crazy artist," and
and then I beat the hell out of all of them.
And then
good.
Like literally.
So the second point Building boundary when it comes to requests from others. I think this one is huge in terms of deciding when enough is enough for you, and not just in adjunct teaching, but with any job. And perhaps this is more dangerous in a full-time teaching position because you know that's your job, but you have to decide when you've done enough for the day or the week or whatever it might be. Julia writes that a sustained artistic career is made of two variables, talent and character. This isn't character in terms of how nice you are, but she says simply meaning the character or tone of your personality, your exact nature, and that great talent linked to an erratic character yields an erratic career. But of course, a sustained creative career requires discipline and the courage to evict that which does not serve the goal of excellence. And things that don't serve goals are different for every person. For some, if you have too many projects, nothing is helping you get better. You know, you've just spread yourself so thin that it's not going to work. Perhaps family obligations are something that don't serve you well. Or volunteer work. As much as we want to give our time, you know, like these Make Music projects, as you were talking, Megan, I was like, I want to do that. I could do that. That'd be great. But then I thought, wait, if this doesn't happen at a time in my life when I have the energy to give to it, it could be really detrimental. And so I think it's a balance that we have to find.
Right.
Yeah, and it's tough to find, and it's a very individual thing. Further on this building boundaries idea, she says, when you're in a place of success, so perhaps you've landed that tenure track job, perhaps all requests are reasonable and worthy. But if they're too much, they're simply too much. Mm-hmm. She compares the artistic persona to a child. When it's over-disciplined, it acts out, it stops working, it sulks, and it gives you the silent treatment. I love that one, actually. Lastly, thinking of creative energy like a creative bank account and needing to budget it. She actually starts by correlating artistry to love, to being in love with someone. And she says, when we're in love, we find our partners fascinating and ourselves with them. When we are in a creative recovery, we find ourselves fascinating. We fall in love with our own ideas, insights, inspirations, and impulses. But when we put ourselves too low in the pecking order, we neglect our work or do it distractedly. Value systems are as individual as fingerprints. Each of us has a set of priorities that may be baffling to others, but absolutely necessary to ourselves. Violating our true selves, we soon feel worthless and undeserving. This in turn prevents our acting on our own behalf, and so we suffer further. And value systems here is what she's talking about. What do you need in order to become excellent in your art? And that's different per person. And Megan, you said you had something.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, all these quotes are so wonderful, and this is just like ding, 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 resonating so much with me because I have been struggling with this so much, especially over the past 2 years, having a full-time job and trying to find a balance, because it isn't like a clear track like when you're in school. It's like you have to, these are the requirements, and you do the requirements and you get the degree. And I mean, there are lots of variables within that, but I found there are like goals and you get to them. And I think with teaching, with university teaching, there are just so many things. There are so many things that are constantly being asked of you, and you can work 24/7 and never get and still have more to do. It's just constant. And I'm definitely the type of person that takes on too many things. And the way that I've been measuring this for myself recently is, like, do you guys ever feel when you're really inspired or you're really motivated or you have this idea that you're really excited about? You know that feeling? Like, it's hard to describe. Mm-hmm. It's just, right?
Inspiration.
I use that. And I'm always a person, I've always known myself to be a person who gets really excited about things and is motivated to do things and gets excited about projects for the future. And I started to lose that because I was doing too many things, and lots of things were being asked of me, and I didn't know what I could say no to, or I didn't know when to leave the office. I did, and it was just, there were just so many things happening, and so I finally have found that my way, I think, of dealing with that is getting my creativity and my inspiration and my motivation back, and that's how I've started to measure it for myself. Like, it almost felt like it would be like months before I felt that, and then I would feel it, and I would be like, oh, okay, this is me. Here I am. Like, that's me. And so instead of saying no and feeling negative about it, I've seen it more as protection of that time, because I like feeling that way. I love feeling that way. I know that the more I feel that way, the more productive I'm going to be, and the more I'm going to get closer to my goals. Whereas if I stop feeling that, it's just going to be the constant grind. And what's the point of that?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think I feel that too, Megan. I think back to March when we had spring break here, and I literally spent my spring break driving down to Pensacola, Florida, doing a gig, then driving to Fort Smith, Arkansas, to do a clinic and a concert, and then I drove to Huntsville, Alabama to do a concert, and then by the time I got back to Troy, spring break was over. And while the trip overall was great,
right, because you're doing things that you want to do, however,
yeah, and then it becomes playing priorities and just kind of saying, okay, I really shouldn't do this. So even this past year with for me, finishing up my doctorate, and then my fiance and I have a duo together called Sources Duo. So we went up to Virginia, and we also drove up to Wisconsin, and that was a lot. So I knew that, okay, when summer rolls around, and I'm getting married, that's what's happening, this summer for me. Like, it's really easy, I think, in the summer, especially for us, when you don't have your classes or your students to say, oh, I'm going to do all these projects that I wanted to do, but I couldn't get away from school during the school year. So now I'm going to go do those now. And then by the time school starts up, then you're burnt out, and it's like.
Right. And the same with the spring break. Like, it's a spring break. The spring break is there for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add that Rob Knopper has a lot of really good blog entries about this. But I was just searching around. He has one in particular called "Why to Choose Family Over Practicing," and he talks about practice guilt. He says practice guilt is the feeling you get at every moment telling you to go practice. Which we could talk all day about this, but in short, practicing is, don't get me wrong, a good thing, and we should all do it. But at a certain point, when practicing overtakes your life, what's the point of music if you only do music? You have to have things to make you passionate about music. So yeah, I think that I don't know if taking a break is the right word I'm looking for, but finding some other passion to go along with it.
It needs to be prescribed. Just like medication is prescribed in certain dosages, that's what practice has to do. Has to be in working and things like that. Otherwise, you overdose.
Well, I think it goes back to what Julia was saying, that your own value system, your own balance, if you will, of practice and family and social life and personal dreaming about your own projects, it's different for everyone. And I would think most people at some point choosing family time over practice will make you happier, and you'll practice better tomorrow. Most people are like that. Not everybody, though. I think some people are able to do whatever practicing they want. And similarly, there are those, I feel this, that I have all these different parts of me. There's part of me that wants to be a writer, a part that's oh, I'm going to make clothes for a living, and then a part that's going to play music, and then a part that's going to write books. And it's hard to shut off one of those. And so I think I have one of those erratic characters that she's talking about, in the sense that I can't separate some of those things because then I feel so imbalanced. And kind of linking back to what you said, Megan, that for some reason school, it felt easier, and maybe it's because we knew there was a finite end.
Right.
We only had to live like that for so long, and we knew we got this big thing out of it at the end. But I remember, living that life, and I wasn't writing, and I wasn't doing a lot of other creative things that I like because I was practicing so much. And I said, this is the time to practice. But I would also have nights where I would just be up till 4 in the morning, like watching great movies and just bawling my eyes out because it was like you just have to have something else sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get up. I had the 7 a.m. practice time, so I get up at 6:30 for my 7 a.m. practice, but it's temporary, and there's something about that that makes it possible.
Right, and then when all of a sudden that structure, that kind of forced structure is gone, it's scary. You kind of have to figure out. You really have to think for yourself and find what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
outside of school.
We gave at the TEDx seminar, Laurel and I each gave a clinic to the composer camp that was there, and one of the things I said is, when you're trying to get people to play your works, you should probably consider trying to find performers who are kind of where you are at. So don't go hand your pieces to Laurel or Ted or myself and expect a big result. There's no harm in that. You're welcome to do that, but we kind of have a backlog of projects that are reserved for our creative energy savings account, and you may not get much from that. Sure enough, right after it, really nice young student comes up to me and says, "Hey, that was great. Thank you so much. So, could I send you some of my stuff? Would that be cool?" and it's like, well, I mean, thank you, but I'm just not hungry for that right now because I'm already completely satiated on being freaking way overloaded, and I don't know. It's a good thing to be aware of.
Out there who would be hungry for it. So find those people.
Well, exactly, and that's what I was saying. I was saying no, there are these people who are looking for projects who don't have this backlog of projects yet. That's who you need to send it to, and actually that's going to do much more for you because you guys need to grow up together. It's that whole lecture of, man, don't kiss up to your teachers, kiss up to your colleagues. They're the ones who are going to hire you in the end. Your teacher is not going to be the one who hires you. They might hand you a little gig or something, but it's ultimately going to be the people in your age group that you're coming up with that are going to forge the next new cool collaborative project or literally hire you for a job, whatever. Hey,
that's real sound advice.
Yeah, I've said that over and over and over, and it's not even just my opinion. I mean, just look around. It's clearly what you see. You look at a generation above us. They all know each other. They're all pals. They all went to school together. I mean, we can't seem to talk to anybody on the podcast who's a generation older than us who didn't know or go to school or play snare drum duos with the last guest we talked to, who was a generation above us. Yeah.
So, Casey, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying I should send all of my pieces to Evelyn Glennie to play.
Hey, Evelyn played my little Rototom duet that I wrote when I was undergrad.
Did she really?
Right.
Yeah, with Johann Berger. Yeah, I think they've done it a few times.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Have you guys had Garrett popcorn before?
Megan?
No.
It's so good. It's a Chicago thing.
Hey, let's get an appearance from Rob. Is Rob hiding somewhere back there?
What?
Let's get a Rob appearance. Is he hiding back there?
Oh, he's shopping.
Oh my!
More popcorn.
That sounds nice.
Yeah,
I was
popcorn's
shopping
good.
and that's when I bought the Garrett popcorn and came home for the podcast.
Yeah.
Hey, so we're pretty well over time. So I just, and not that we have to hurry, but I just wanted to end in an area of Ben Fraley oriented topics. So I was hoping, Ben, would you just give us a heads up on your current projects or maybe some things we might be able to look out for? I know we had talked a little bit about composition of yours recently.
Also, Ben, I had a quick question to add to this. Could you talk about frame drumming a bit? How you got into frame drumming, etc.?
Oh God, Ben. All right.
I wanted to
have
ask
a
that from the
nickname for
beginning. You didn't
Ben.
get to it, so.
Benjamin, quick question, Charles. That's his
Yeah, and
nickname.
I have a few questions for Megan and Laurel too. When you're done with that, since we're
Good thing
almost
I have the
75 minutes
popcorn.
in.
I'll be brief. For the first time in my life, I think I'll be brief. Frame drawing for me, it has been my main clinic topic as I have been going to different schools throughout the Southeast. I was lucky enough to be able to do one at JMU, and Casey and Laurel were great hosts. Frame drawing for me was something that came about when I was doing my undergrad at the Harvard School, and a senior, Mark Katsounis, who plays in the Lib duo, was just playing a drum, and I was like, well, what is that? And he's like, well, this is a tar. You know, we had Glenn Velez on faculty, and he came in and taught us all frame drums. And I was like, well, would you teach me? And he said, of course. So we started kind of just starting off with a basic frame drum, a tar. Actually, hold on a minute. Okay. So you get basic tar. It's a North African frame drum. It's your snare drum of the frame drum world. And learned sounds and learned different kinds of rhythms and techniques, and just kept with it. It was kind of like my thing that I went home to after I was done playing marimba and orchestra music and all that stuff. It was just something I could sit down in front of the TV and get better at, so that the more I got interested in, the more I started doing it. I would go take a couple lessons with Glenn Velez. So I got into like playing Rek, which is an Egyptian tambourine. There's also Pandero, which is a Brazilian tambourine. Kanjira, which is a South Indian frame drum. Balron, which is a Irish frame drum. And then also my particular favorite, which I'm getting more used to knowing, is the Aduf. And this is a Portuguese frame drum. And the thing I love about these instruments is they're all kind of similar, and yet they're all very different in terms of their techniques, their sounds, but also culturally they're very, very interesting. So when I go and I do a clinic, I preach about its accessibility, how fun it is, and that the technique is not as rigorous as if you're trying to learn how to play timpani or marimba. And if you want just a basic introductory guitar, they're very affordable. So, for me now, aside from getting married in a couple weeks, I'm continuing to get better at my frame drums, but also I write a lot of music for my friends. Like this year, I wrote a piece for Tyler Tolles called The First Shade. It's for solo vibraphone. He'll be releasing that on his first solo disc next year. I also wrote a drum set solo for my friend Catherine Cole. It's a drum set solo called Synchronisms, and she'll actually be attending Eastman in the fall as a master's student. FSU percussionist, and an older piece that I had written in 2008, I made a video with a couple of my friends from Florida State. It's a multiple percussion duet called Shh, and I wrote back in 2008 for me and my friend Matt Smith, and a couple of friends of mine played it on their junior recitals, and then with their help and with the help of Dr. John Parks and Catherine Cole and also Peter Soroka, we made a video. We put it up on Facebook on Friday, and it's been doing really, really well. It's got, I think, over 1,200 views so far. So check it out.
Awesome.
Yeah, great. Okay, cool. Hey, well, man, Dr. Ben Fraley, thanks so much for joining us. Dr. Ben Charles, Laurel, Dr. Megan. Is it Dr. yet, Megan? Do we know?
I don't know. No. May.
All right, well, we're going to be drinking on the podcast in our offices when it happens.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm invited back for that one.
Yeah, great. Yeah, come on back for sure. All right, Master Laurel, Master Casey,
Yeah.
Dr. Fraley, Dr. Charles. All right, you guys, we'll see you at episode 50. Thanks so much, and take it easy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.